We'll go ahead and get started. All right, welcome. Today's speakers really don't need much of an introduction. Pastor Ryan will be here, and Jody Vanderwell, our VP of Consistory and a governing elder, and Deb Dumais, governing elder as well. But I always like to plug what's coming next week as well. So next week is Joash John, who is our liturgist today, and he's a Western Seminary student and the high school youth intern. And interestingly, a few weeks ago, some of us were saying it would be really interesting to hear from Joash sometime, and I was able to tell you we already have him scheduled. So that'll be great. His talk will be Hearing God in Many Accents, which will be kind of the global church, which will be especially interesting, I think. I want to remind you, this will be probably interactive with us, and for our Zoom people, wait till the mic gets to you, or if our panel would repeat the question, just so that our Zoom people can participate as well.
Again, I want to just say a quick word of thanks to having us as governing elders and minister here this morning. We are going to continue what feels like, I think, for governing elders and maybe some in this room, a conversation that we've been having for quite some time. But this is really going to be in 3 parts this morning. And we're hopeful as governing elders / minister that the first 2 parts don't take very long, because we really do want to have a lot of conversation with you. That's the whole point of this. And so there's like a setting the table section, because we're talking about communion. Come on now. And so we're gonna have a setting the table section, a what's on the menu conversation, and then some dinner conversation. That's you. That's the questions part. So to get us started off, I want to hand it over to our Vice President of Consistory, Jody Vanderwell, to just kind of begin our conversation. Jody?
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you all for being here this morning. Good morning. Ryan said it so nicely. I thought of this as the what, why, and the how. So I'm the what, Ryan's the why, and Deb and Ryan are the how. Let me say, leading into this, that from a governance perspective, as Consistory thinks about weekly communion, and that's what this is about, is this effort to consider weekly communion at our church, and the idea that we will do a pilot program beginning right after Easter for 8 weeks and get a sense of how this works. And we all go into this with certain notions about this. We've had different experiences, we have different opinions, we have different leanings about this. We all do. And so I want to really encourage us all to go into it with an open mind. Kind of test your assumptions, test your preferences, think about the what ifs. But don't walk into this saying, yeah, I know what I think about this, so I hope it goes this way or it goes this way. And I have the same feelings. I've had experiences just as you have, and have perspectives. And so I too am going into this saying, okay, let's try it and see how this works for Third Reformed Church. From a governance perspective, our consistory is not a direct representative body. We're not going to say, well, 6 people came up to me and said, I really want to keep doing this. 3 people came up to me and said no, so I have to vote yes, because that was 6-3. I also am not going to vote what I want. I may get through this 8-week period and say, you bet, this is exactly what we should do. I will look at this from the perspective of what's best for Third Reformed Church. So part of that is, what do most people like? What do they prefer? What are they comfortable with? But that's only a factor. And to the extent you see other factors we all should be considering, I hope you will speak up. Not just, I love this or I hate this, but as a church body, here's what I think is really good for us. So personally, that would be helpful to me to get that kind of input from you all as we consider doing this. We have picked a time to do this when there are a number of communion services planned already. So while it's an 8-week trial, we have New Member Sunday, we have Confirmation Sunday, Congregational Meeting Sunday, Pentecost, and Trinity Sunday, all in that 8-week period. So actually, this is probably 3 extra communions, if my math is right. So it will be a pilot, and yet it will be a period of time where maybe it doesn't change things as much as it would be changed, we'll say, in ordinary time over the middle of the summer. So keep that in mind as well as you evaluate this whole process. I think I've covered what I was supposed to cover in this little dog and pony show. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan for the why, the real theological, thoughtful part of this discussion.
What? No. All right. No, I'm here to, and thanks, Jody. That was really great. And I just want to echo and affirm all of what you just said, our desire, and to use this opportunity to get a celebratory season. I know that there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of experiences I've had at church trying this in different seasons. And one is like a natural, well, we should do it in Lent because we're constantly trying to remember the sacrifice of Jesus, or we should try it in, over the summer because more people take vacation, so not everybody will feel put out, or whatever else, right? Like, and our goal here was, as Jody said, that there is part of our discussion was sort of a season of celebration, right? Like this is something we get to do, whether we do it once or twice, but we also have, over the recent years, paired this with things that are really meaningful for our congregation. So, and she read the list: new members, confirmation, congregational meeting, one service is Pentecost with El Encuentro. These are things that we get really excited about, and so we wanted to make sure that communion could be a part of that celebration. So where did this all come from? Why is consistory talking about this? Weekly communion. Well, it has been on the hearts and minds of people in this congregation long before I got here, but I can only join in the stream since I've been here to say that this was something that I've always been really passionate about, but I've also known the experience of getting this very wrong. And so that was something I actually shared with the search team when we were talking about like a failure that I had in ministry. This was the failure I talked about, right? Like we moved to weekly communion at my last congregation, and we didn't do it in the most loving way possible. We just said, we're elders, we're going to make this decision, and we did it. And, we thought that we were communicating fully throughout the whole time, and it turns out the summer, again, is a really bad time to talk with people because some people came back from their cottages and were like, hey, I am tanned and very concerned. And so, but the where of the history really was when she was here, Dr. Madison Pierce came to me and she was like, hey, I'd really love to see us work towards a weekly communion. How might we do that? And because she knew that I shared a similar conviction, and we said, well, this is how that process works. We'd go to our consistory and our elders, and we'd start to ask the question about, could we do this? And if so, how would we do this? And so we brought this to the governing elders, and the governing elders, through a couple meetings of conversation, just said, not yes or no, but rather, hey, we're finding that we would do well to know more about communion before we even had a conversation about this. And in the course of that, the elders just felt like there was more to learn. So there was about a 9-month book study. Consistory met an hour and 15 minutes earlier than we normally did for 9 months, and we read through J. Todd Billings's book, Remembrance, Communion, and Hope. And Madison facilitated that conversation for us. It was very nice. And so we just read the book. We shared some of our thoughts with one another about that, and what came out of that was, hey, this feels like we have really appreciated getting to know more about communion. We've appreciated the concern to move toward weekly communion. We could see where that would be a real benefit from the congregation, or to the congregation. There's also some hang-ups that we want to immediately know are probably present within the hearts and minds of some of the congregation. And so how are we going to, if we were to take a next step, how are we going to get feedback from the congregation? And initially, we went the academic route and said, well, what we ought to do is have a bunch of sessions where pastors and teachers and theologians can come in and would talk at you and or with you. What am I saying? Talk with us about what all of this means. And then the governing elders discerned that no, because that is, while it's great to learn more about communion, we could just keep learning more about communion as we did this. This is an experiential part of being in the church, right? So what the elders said was, could we, as we're wondering about this, actually just try it for a season and hear from people about how they're receiving it? And we could say, hey, we're going to pilot this. We're going to experience all the new feelings and rhythms together, and then go through that. And so that's where we are now, as we, as elders, are kind of in the midst of discerning and proposing. We would propose that we do this for a little while and gain some feedback from the congregation as it's happening, and have that add to our discernment as elders and consistory. So that's kind of the history about where all of that came from, and what your elders are hoping to learn from this process with you. Before we move to some time where we can interact, I want to invite Deb up for just the very last part with me as we talk about some practicalities and hurdles. Deb, if you'd come on up. So there's a couple of things that we know right away that we want to make sure that you hear from us as elders that we are very much aware of. And that is, communion Sundays are often longer than non-communion Sundays. We know that. That is true. And so what would we do to talk? We want to have you understand that we know that that's going to be a part of our rhythm. So would we say, are we looking to shorten those services down? Are we just looking to live with 70-minute services from here on out? Those are decisions that the governing elders are aware of we would have to process together, right? Those decisions haven't been made. We might have personal feelings about those things, but that is what we know. We also understand that this impacts programming, not just the programming that happens after, like a second hour, this, for instance, or El Encuentro, or our Sunday school, but it also affects programs different, right? Children in worship are affected. Young disciples are affected. Like, those are things that we know, right? We've had some provisional conversations with those leaders, those families. We know those things are impacted. So that is also going into the discernment of your governing elders and consistory as we think about these things.
The other thing that we have to think about is who and how many people are serving every single week. So if you remember, the consistory recently passed a resolution that we want to welcome all members to help us in the serving of communion. So we have, I think, 8 or 9 governing elders, 8 maybe, and 4 parish elders or care elders. And so what we're thinking is, from here on out, 2 of our current consistory elders, and there's a few in the room here, would be preparing the elements and always present. Always have at least 2 of our serving elders be from the active consistory, one of whom will be the lead elder of that week. And the lead, of course, prepares the bread and the juice and sets it out. And so we have 8 members now serving communion on the communion Sundays. There's 6 in the front with the bread and the wine and a couple pastors, and then there are 2 rovers, and we are even serving the tech team and any choir members in the from our membership serving every week. One of my duties as a governing elder is to coordinate people for serving communion. So if you've let any one of us, the pastors or Kristen or me, know that you are willing and able to serve communion, you are already on our list. We welcome more people to get on that list, and I will email early in the week looking for people this coming Sunday already, and Lynn has already agreed to be our lead elder this Sunday. So I will be filling that volunteer opportunity for this week, and happy to have everyone in this room on the list. Many already are for serving communion. Anything else?
Don't think so. Thanks, Deb. And
Yeah.
this is by no means an exhaustive list, so we're open to hearing that there are other things that we need to think about and be thinking about, and that gets us to, again, what we hope for most. So we did our job as best we could. I think we got done here with like 15 minutes of that introduction, and we'd really like to spend the rest of our time engaging with you all about some questions or comments that you might have for us as governing elders that will help us continue our discernment toward this pilot and beyond. And so, is there anything that you've heard this morning that you have a question on? Sorry, I was on mute the whole time. So I see a hand go up, Jeff Monroe, and then Jane Lott. That's not how you're supposed to start it. We got lots of questions.
I was thinking of, I wish Don Brugink were here, because I remember learning from Don Brugink that in Protestant churches, especially Reformed churches, the pulpit is elevated because the center of the service is the proclamation of the word. Mm-hmm. And that in Catholic churches, it's the center of the service is the altar, mm-hmm. and the celebration of the Lord's Supper. So I'm wondering if you could speak to the theology a little bit more, and what's going on in your mind and Todd's or whoever else's about that.
So, I mean, for me, what I would say is to say that the Protestant outlook is a more word-centric worship would be correct, but it would also not be the intention of John Calvin. So I think that it is true that that's what Protestant church has done and Calvinist churches have done, is elevated the word over and against the sacrament. But if you read the Institutes and if you read John Calvin's other work, particularly his commentaries, he doesn't understand worship not having both of these things present all the time. So like there's a confusion for Calvin as his church in Geneva, as he was trying to get them to move to weekly communion, and they were like, no, because Catholics. And Calvin was like, Robin said so what? I didn't say so what. Robin said so what. But so the idea for Calvin, right, is that word and sacrament go together. So every time you hear the word, you hear the sacrament. If you don't have the sacrament, it'd be just as weird as if you just gathered around the table and never heard the proclamation. But that has been, Jeff is absolutely correct. The pulpit has been elevated, and in the history of Protestant traditions and the history of the Reformed tradition, the expression of the word has been elevated in our practice. Yep. So.
I'm looking to see if Steve Stam is here. No. We did have, when we had 2 services years ago, the early morning service had communion every Sunday. I don't know if you're aware of that. So we have gone through this before.
Yeah, I heard it was bi-weekly.
Maybe it was bi-weekly. I didn't get up early enough to.
But it was, yes. The history that was shared with me was bi-weekly, not weekly. But yes, there was. I'm really glad that you brought that up. There was a precedent for on more occasions to celebrate the supper, and I know that was part of the consistory and the elders' discernment regarding all members in good standing being able to serve, because that was also the practice at the 8:30 service. So yeah, thank you for that, Jane. Marcia.
Is there something in the, and I'm using the wrong terminology, but Reformed law, if you will, regarding that there must be elders who serve the communion? Okay. Well,
Yeah,
then I won't
there's-
ask my second question.
Well, I want to just make sure that it's called the Book of Church Order. In the Book of Church Order, it says the elders must supervise and the ministers must administer the sacrament. And so we need at least 2 elders at every worship service to supervise the proper administration of the sacrament. And the idea is that the elders not only supervise the congregation, they also supervise the minister, so that I don't get up there and say something weird, right? And, and it's our job together to make sure that all of this is done in good order. But the Book of Church Order leaves lots of room for how that supervision looks. So for instance, right, that's why we can say, hey, if there's 2 elders and the minister does the words of institution, then we can feel good about our people, our congregation, being in good standing, serving that to one another, having been properly raised up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was just going to say, I've been a member of various kinds of churches, denominations, and I've seen it done so many different ways. That would still apply, I think, or could apply. But I've been to churches where there were just stations where each person went up after it had been, the pastor had, said the introductory part. And I've also been to ones where parts of the congregation did the serving. Now, I'm sure there was probably an elder in the midst. I'm not really sure. But yeah, so I've seen it done lots of different ways also.
Yep. Thank you for that, Marcia. Gretchen.
I've also been in other churches where there was an opportunity to give a blessing as opposed to the sacrament if someone is uncomfortable or is a visitor. I wondered if you were considering that as part of the service.
We absolutely can be open to that. I have, in El Encuentro, this is pretty common actually. So in our 10 a.m. service, I have not experienced a lot of people who come up besides really little infants, and I pray or bless those infants if the parents want me to. But in the time where this shows up a lot is in El Encuentro, when they're coming from different traditions and they're not quite sure what El Encuentro even is, right? And so like we've been, the pastors and elders that serve in El Encuentro, and some have been in this room, like you may see more of a prayer time show up in those services. But at 10 a.m., I have not had adult members come up and go like this, or it's traditional to go like that, but in that case, yeah, I've offered lots of blessings that way.
Okay. My second follow-up is, I'm glad you are aware of how this affects logistically for children, especially that we are now welcoming to the table. It has kind of disrupted things in children worship.
Yeah.
And we would have to go to the hybrid service so that they're experiencing the order of worship upstairs as opposed to downstairs with our worship schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might think of bringing the kids to a worship place upstairs as opposed to down in the basement.
Yeah, I mean, Gretchen, you and I have had these conversations, and I look forward to using you as a conversation partner, right? Like, we're going to need to know how this affects our young students, particularly. We've got a lot of young families in our family room, and there's talk about little lambs coming back, right? So we're going to have this conversation in a number of areas, and one, that's really good problems to have, right? Like, but it's also things that we're going to need you close to help us continue to think about how that would work if we move in that direction. Yeah. I see Judy up front. Hold on. Wait for the microphone.
You don't think I'm loud enough already?
The people on Zoom. People on Zoom need you, Judy. Come on now.
My question is, how many other churches are you aware of, if any, in Western Michigan, Midwestern Michigan, such as Grand Rapids and all of these? I was connected to the CRC for quite some time, and we tried it for a while, But do you think I can remember why they stopped it? No.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find out if I need to.
Yeah. Judy,
Would like to know that.
your question is, do other churches do this? And yes.
How have they worked it out?
It depends on the church, and those stories are unique. And but yes, there are different churches, even CRC ones, that have them every week and in the area. And yep. Those stories are unique to those congregations. Yeah. I see Peg and then Janelle.
Okay. I'm concerned about impact and meaning. I think about, we celebrate Easter once a year. We celebrate Christmas once a year. And the impact is much greater, I think, because of, not only that, but because of the fact that it isn't as frequent. If I were convinced that the impact each week would be great, I would say I'm for it. I'm not against it. I'm listening. I'm open to the possibility that the congregation might see it differently than I do. But I also, one of the thought comes to my mind, would impact be enhanced, perhaps, if different pastors presented, administered, officiated? Because then we would have a variety that we haven't had most of the time until now.
Yeah.
To think about.
Absolutely. Janelle's going to be presiding next week because I'll be gone. So there you go. Right? Like, look at us putting already your suggestions into practice. Isn't that great?
Thank you.
I think that's really good, and I appreciate all that you said there. I'd want to be mindful that I feel like I'm the only one speaking here. So Jody or Deb, do you have anything you want to add to Peg's question?
Peg, I was not part of Consistory while they studied Todd Billings' book. So I asked our pastors in Consistory, what can I do to get caught up to speed on why we might want to do this? And I don't remember which pastor directed me to the RCA liturgy, but that's actually where I started, and I've been spending some time often reading through the order of worship for communion. And I just feel really uplifted by it. I love the introduction to it, where we're here to remember, we're here to commune, we're here to hope, which we need a ton of these days. So in reading more into it and reading also the invocation and the prayers afterwards, I feel like that gift of the Holy Spirit after taking the sacrifice of what Jesus has given to us is so needed, especially in this time. And so I'm really excited about the weekly blessing of that remembrance and that hope, and the gift of the Holy Spirit through these times. And hopefully we'll all feel like it's not rote, it is a new blessing every week. And Janelle, I think, often says nourishment.
Amen. Yeah, thanks, Deb.
I think my question is, and Peg, I think you sort of planted a piece of it. When we think about practices, there's the why and how, right? Mm-hmm. How we go about doing things, that's logistics, and you've talked about that. The why, you've touched on a little bit. What would be, or what would be some concerns or questions from more of a theological perspective of why we wouldn't do this every week? Mm-hmm. Maybe you covered that already.
Yeah,
I'm just curious about that.
It's a great question. This is where I want to be really careful, because I don't actually think there are any. And so, like, I want to leave room for people that might hold an opinion like, yeah, actually, there's some reasons that I think are, that would do this, and I think, but I have not come across a theological argument that says this is not a good idea. There are arguments about context, which make a lot of sense, right? Like, again, during the Reformation, it was a needed thing to separate themselves from Catholicism. That's how they felt. That was their context. They said, we need to do this, so we are to be understood as different from what they saw as a corrupt papacy, right? Okay. That can make sense, right? You can have various reasons to abstain if you are in a season of discipline, and maybe the church is feeling that they're in a season of communal discipline, right? I've read some really interesting articles about that. Churches that have abstained from the table during a season because they feel like they need to communally apologize to one another and come around the table, like they need to figure this thing out, and so they put themselves under discipline, weirdly enough. But like, yeah, there's something there, I suppose you could say that there's true. Those are contextual, that's contextual rationale though. As far as theological rationale for why you would not come and be fed by your Heavenly Father who wants to feed you, I can't get my head around that. So I think that you need to understand that's where I am. There may be people that have a theological view. I don't understand that framework. So,
yeah. So thank you. So I think, Peg, what you brought up is in my mind adding another piece, right? It's the why, the how, and the what's the impact. And not that you wouldn't do something because of that, but being mindful of that. I appreciate you just thinking about that. So.
Absolutely.
This isn't really different, I think, from what you've said, but we do have those things we do every week in worship that are repetitive. Every week we open the worship with a votum, and we have our salutation that comes. We do our confession and the prayers of assurance. But each week we frame those things slightly differently as we lead into them. That helps us gain a little different perspective on that. And I find, for example, especially with the votum as we go into it, the way that we begin worship by setting the stage for our being in worship this morning, why we're here, and we come because our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So I think with communion, it's a similar sort of thing. We have the same words of institution each time, but we come into it with a different frame of reference because of what's preceded it, I think. And so that helps frame it in a different manner each time we go into it.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. So Dennis, Joyce, and then Dennis.
And it's just from way back, our parents thought it was, if you do it too often, you take it too much for granted. Familiarity breeds contempt, sort of.
Yeah. For this argument, I want to say just very generally that it's a real thing. It's a real thing we might feel, especially leading into it. I would want to recommend to you the work of Jamie Smith, a professor at Calvin University. He has a 3-volume series. You don't have to read all 3 volumes. Instead, read the shortest book, or his distillation of his 3 volumes, You Are What You Love. And in that book, he talks about the liturgical patterns of the church, or any liturgical patterns we keep, are the formational things that shape us. And so I don't want to, or I would want to just recommend that book or that kind of thinking, because the church has proven through, millennia that it's actually in the living into these things that cause us to go deeper, even in times where, again, I will be really honest with you. There are Sundays you will show up and it might feel rote. Just like there are Sundays you show up and you might go, this confession is stupid this week. You might. right? Like, these things happen because we're real people. But the overall practice of this shared meal, just like the shared prayer, the shared hearing of the word, are where we've, like, these are the things that we believe shape us. So that's, I would just recommend that book, because it's a real concern. It's a valued concern. I think I identify with it, and I just want to point you to that, a voice that could help sort of communicate some of that. Sorry, Dennis.
I'm just going to say that over 50 years ago, 56 years ago, when I was a child growing up in a Reformed church, communion was like 4 times a year, and very special, but it was also very scary. The Sunday before, I can remember the pastor telling the congregation, prepare yourselves, cleanse yourselves, almost to the point that whether or not you're good enough of a Christian to come the following Sunday to attend that Lord's Supper. I'm not of that opinion that believe that that was the right way to look at the Lord's Supper, and I am in no way saying that I am fully I don't think that was the right way to go at it. I'm fully for what you're doing here. I'm just saying that there's been a broad range of how people of the Reformed Church has looked at this celebration of the Lord's Supper. And that's kind of what I think sits in some of our minds in the background as we look at this and what you've been talking about.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Thank you for just naming that. That is a real thing that our consistory needs to keep mentioning. So hold on, right before you start, Robin, Jeff had something, and then Robin, and I know that we got multiple mics now.
Yeah,
and I've got a few from Zoom as well.
Okay, thank you. So
got several from Zoom. I've actually have a question for Jody and a question for Ryan. Which one should I ask first?
Jody's question first.
Jody,
for sure.
Okay, Jody. No, Jody, I remember your dad once telling a story about he was in his office minding his own business, and a technician came in and changed out his phone and he said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "Well, this is better." And he's like, "But I know how to use this. Don't make me have this other one." And so, and I've thought of that story often, because at some point he needed to get the new phone. But so many of us are just set in the ways that we like things, and change becomes the issue. So I'm curious, as the head of the consistory, how much of this are you thinking is theological, and how much of it is just our own resistance to change because we've done things a certain way?
My dad never sat in his office and minded his own business. But yeah, the new phone was a big deal. Yeah. I don't think it's theological at Third Church. I think it's we've always done things the way we've done it. And actually, I kind of remember, I think it was Eleanor Palma who kind of pushed us from quarterly to once a month way back in the day. And that was a big deal too. And so, yeah, change is just hard for everybody.
Great. So my question for Ryan is, El Encuentro has done this, right, since the beginning. And so could you speak to the relationship between El Encuentro and the 10 a.m. service a little bit?
So actually, El Encuentro did it for a season, then moved away, and they're not anymore. Like, it's a more fluid situation there.
So are they going to test it out for 8 weeks, like the 10 a.m.?
I don't know. We are not currently having these things be the same conversation. Angel and Janelle have done a really good job communicating the ever-evolving situation that is El Encuentro. And so I think for a while it was, well, we need a meal every week, and so I think so much depends on what's happening in the moment in El Encuentro that these conversations we're having as 10 a.m. are privileged conversations, right? I think theologian Scott McKnight once said, it must be nice to have the luxury to debate how, worship, because everything else in your life must be going pretty great if you're sitting around going, can we have drums or not? And it's the whole thing about the needs that are coming to the fore in El Encuentro are, so I think Angel and Janelle are just having to be really flexible in that leadership, and we as, another pastor or our elders just continue to try to support them in the moment. So they're currently not having, they're having communion on the schedule we are having it currently in 10 a.m. So
Ryan, let's go to our Zoom
please.
question.
Yep, so Kara Green says, I like the idea of every week. I think the weekly practice allows a deeper level of connection to the Holy Spirit and to each other. Matt Young had a question, which could the process of how communion is administered vary from week to week? That might help keep each service impactful.
Yeah, to answer Matt's question, this is something we've talked about in our governing elders, right? Like not just the RCA prayer every week and the response with Psalm 103, but are there different formats we can take? And when we have one service in the fellowship hall, sometimes we'll have stations. One time we gathered around in a big circle, and that was a hot mess, but it was still kind of fun. And, so there are other things that we can try, and part of that is when we get into it, and I can just say this from my last experience at a church that's done this, the freedom that you have, because you're not, every time isn't so like, well, we love the RCA prayer, so let's keep doing the RCA prayer, or we love the CRC prayer, we got to do that one every time because we only get 12 times to do it. Now it's like, well, we could do it this time this way, and we could do it this time next way, right? Like, as long as those center points are the center points. Yeah.
Last one, Phil Corey asked this question, is there any other ceremony that Jesus commanded us to do?
That's a loaded thing. If he's angling for the 7 sacraments of the Catholic Church, we're not going to go there. Despite how much I love, divine unction and ordination, but yeah, not in the same way as font and table. People will often point to John chapter 13 and say, well, shouldn't we be, washing others' feet? No, not in the same way. Not from a like what the church has discerned as a sacrament practice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Robin.
I want to add to what Dennis said. My impression is in a lot of churches that celebrate communion rarely or less than weekly, communion becomes primarily an emphasis on sin. And when Nathan and I worshiped at the Catholic Church down the street, it became obvious that communion is about celebration, and that the going forward for the elements becomes. We each are in the procession somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was wondering, for me, sometimes I think the experience of communion, which is a deep blessing, but also it's, when we think about what Christ has done for us, I think it's also a call to service of, okay, now, go out. And I mean, there's so much going on in our world right now that, there's something everybody can do in some fashion to also be sacrificing or simply giving to our world in this time of such utter chaos.
Thanks, Marcia.
I'm one of the governing elders, so I have been struggling with this idea for a long time, and I kind of want to second what Deb said about viewing communion as a gift. And I like the idea of giving our children the message that there's a gift that comes to them every week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Vicki. Stephen.
Just a quick one. First of all, you won't have any friends saying, I really want to go to church Sunday because we're having communion instead of every week. But my question is, children, how are they being taught? It's kind of really affect them from, what does this mean? Mm-hmm. You mean I'm going to get a gift? You know, there's a lot of different ways to look at these children and their conversation, their with the Sunday school teacher, Wednesday night services, a lot of things that need to be addressed, I'm sure.
Yeah. And just 2-second response, and I want to jump to Stephen. That is discipleship we all need. Not just our kids, because as much as I can, there are some times that I am convinced that Silas knows more about the mystery of communion than I do. And as much as we can know, there's a lot more we don't. It is by definition a mystery. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to introduce myself because I haven't been able to talk with all of you. My name is Stephen Henriksen. I joined a little over a year and a half ago now. I grew up Catholic, and for the first 21 years of my life, attended Catholic church. And so I can speak to a little bit of how I felt receiving communion weekly. And I just want to say that in my personal experience, the meaning and importance of it has never lost itself on me. And every week is still special. I served as an altar server in the Catholic Church, and let me tell you, it's been a big shift coming to Reformed type churches. First, when my wife and I started dating, we went to Christian Reformed Church, and just as a Catholic, every week still that we take communion, I'm terrified I'm going to drop the bread on the floor. But yeah, I just feel that no matter what we decide, I'm grateful to be a part of a church that can have these discussions openly and are willing to hear out everybody's opinion and have good conversation about it. So that's what I'd like to say.
Thanks, Stephen.
Well, that's a great way to close. I think we need to stop because we're at time. But thank you so much for making this opportunity for us, Ryan and Deb and Jody. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.